Well, I'm here today with Michelle Weir, who is a much respected, much loved teacher at IGS, who has been here a very long time, longer than me, so that means it's past 32 or 3 years. Michelle has been an absolute outstanding educator. Many people consider her to be the second best teacher IGS has ever produced. And she has also been the parent of two young men who went through the school. So what Michelle doesn't know about IGS, particularly in the primary area, is not worth knowing. And I'm really happy to see you here, Michelle, and thank you for coming along.
Well, thanks for that great introduction, Paul.
Absolute pleasure, because it's all true.
I thought you were talking about someone else, actually.
Wow, we both know that's you. One of the interesting things, I'll just tell a little story to start us off with. When I first came to IGS, I kept wondering who this gorgeous Greek woman was. It was, in and out of the staff room, and but like pretty serious looking, and I was always very, very nervous to talk to her at that stage. But even that just tells you how life's changed, because these days I wouldn't even think someone's gorgeous. I would just be thinking that they're just a human being. So
there you go.
Yes.
We've been here a long time.
True. So Michelle, why don't you just tell us your IGS story, how long you've been here, etc., and what you've done.
Yeah. So I started at IGS. It was actually Maxine Blander, who I worked with at a previous school, and she moved to IGS and gave me a call one day and said, there's a casual position going. I've told the principal that she needs to interview you. So I came in. First, I thought I had the wrong address, because I was like, this does not look like a school. But no, I was in the right place, apparently, not a factory. And I was interviewed by Rita Finn. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that really stood out for me in that interview was, first of all, how young she was to be a principal. But also one of her questions right at the start was, so tell me all about yourself, but tell me in Greek. So at that point, I had no idea whether she understood Greek or not, so I mustered my best Greek, and then later found out that she didn't actually understand. Well, she knew some words, but not the right ones, in Greek. And I then had a tour of the school, and it was like nothing else I've ever been in. But it was almost as if the building didn't exist, because all I could feel was this incredible sense of love, connection. I could hear languages. And I remember thinking in that moment, I need this job. This feels like home. These people are my tribe. So I was very grateful when Rita contacted me and gave me it was Year 5 home class teacher and teaching Greek. And this was in 1989.
Yeah, okay.
And then from there, I became permanent. I've always been a home class teacher, but I've been very fortunate at IGS to wear many hats. So I've been K-6 coordinator. I've been middle primary school years coordinator. I even did a stint as preschool coordinator. And now, still teaching, but now I am head of teacher accreditation as well. So being at that stage, that other side of my career, it's really a privilege to work with the younger educators and being able to help them through their career journey. So yeah.
Okay. So you've done a lot and been here a long time. You mentioned the basically being interviewed in Greek. So obviously your family is Greek.
Yes.
And you spoke Greek at home.
Yes.
With your parents and everything.
Yeah.
And then when you came to school, you became a Greek teacher.
Yeah.
So that would have just thrown you in the deep end in terms of the whole IGS ethos of bilingual education.
Absolutely.
So you were teaching Greek. The Greek lasted how long?
Greek was I was only able to teach Greek for the first few years because it was already at that point of being phased out. Yeah. So at the time we actually had 6 languages, Spanish as well, but it wasn't viable to maintain the 6 languages. Yeah. So Greek and Spanish were phased out.
Yeah. Yeah, because that would have been what, early 90s? Greek was still there when I was there.
Yeah.
So Spanish and Greek were both still there when I was there in the early to mid 90s. So it must have been a little bit.
So it would have been,
that.
Yeah.
That was an interesting introduction to what you did at IGS. One of the things I do know is you've formed lifelong friendships while you've been here, and particularly with a particular group of who were then young women, and many of whom are still working at our school.
Yeah.
Really the core of that primary school and the language department was your little gang. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and them and the impact that they've had?
Absolutely. So in those years, the early days, we did everything. So nothing was outsourced. We created the school magazine, we organised events, we did fundraisers. So the community was very close-knit because of the nature of the school and the need for it, but also there was that passion because we really believed in what IGS offered. I guess coming from different cultural backgrounds, so Greek and Italian, we had a real mix. And for me, certainly, that being able to see students speaking languages without shame, being able to share their food without shame, was very different to my own schooling experience. So it started with that connection of the need to be able to do everything ourselves at school. I remember many late nights at IGS in the Surrey Hills campus where we'd order food to eat. Vilma's son Anthony would be asleep on the lounge. He was about 3 or 4 at the time. Yeah. And we'd be just happily working away. And of course, that collegiality then developed into lifelong friendships. These people are now part of my family. Yes. Maxine Blander is my youngest son's, Rafi's godmother. And I never take that for granted, that I come to school each day and I get to work with my best friends. Not many people would be able to say that about their workplace. So that was definitely a real gift that IGS gave me and all of us.
Yeah. No, I concur with all that. The interesting thing in those days, I vividly remember a really early time we started a year at IGS and we had the whole staff in a circle, and I think including everyone there was about 80 people, but there was only 5 males. Yeah. I was one of them. Yeah. And it was very much a girl power sort of vibe there. Yeah. And well, in a lot of ways it still is. Yeah. But I think every now and then you've got to throw a token male in there to get the balance. Absolutely. But you want to talk about, when you talk about those powerhouses that run like Vilma, Maxine, Josie, Jessipina, Lucy, all of those sorts of people who have been part of that powerhouse that's been. Yeah, I guess it started with Rita Finn, with my very first meeting. And I remember thinking, wow, this lady's only, a few years older than me, and she's principal of the whole school. And that really inspired me. And I think the way my journey has taken me through IGS started with that inspiration on that day that I was interviewed. But then having met these very strong, passionate, emotional, but determined women, you could not ask for a better environment to be working in. But then also the bonus was,
you could see them on the weekend and have a really good time as well. So, yeah, it was, for me, who came from a Greek background where my schooling was very different to what IGS is. My time in the 70s and 80s was bittersweet, I suppose, because going to school, there was a lot of racism still. I remember feeling embarrassed about what was in my lunchbox. I remember hoping that my grandmother would pick me up and not utter a word in Greek. But then my home life was a completely different world. It was full of loud people laughing and dancing and of course, huge amounts of food, and that connection with family. And I didn't feel that at school at that time.
At the school where you were?
Where I was at, yeah. But coming to IGS, it reminded me of that. And then being with these colleagues / friends, I think made me who I am today as a person, but also as a teacher.
Well, they all had similar experiences. Maybe that's not the same ethnicity, but definitely similar experience. I mean, even someone like me who's got zero ethnicity, I used to get called a wog all the time when I was at school, and just purely from my surname. So, you know, if you come into school with, you know, Souvlaki or something, everyone's thinking, who's this weirdo? I'm getting stuck in you. So, that's very good. I think being part of that group of women who I always think of as that sort of, you know, the engine room of the school, I think, and that the fact that many of them are still here and still churning away, it's hard to believe that level of commitment and intensity has lasted all these years. I think that's a testament to you guys, to that passion you're talking about.
And I think that's also because of the beginning that we had. That, you know, what Reg created was something that was so different to any other school out there. And that connection within the school community was so strong. And when you've worked really hard for something, you always care. It's a bit like raising kids, you know. It's IGS is our little baby. And, you know, I've seen IGS change over the years, and that's great, you know. But that, I think, what Reg ignited when he founded the school, that spirit and that fire is still there amongst a core group of people who know the history and who know the struggle.
Okay, this is a difficult question. Two things, it's a two-part question. One is, do you think that the younger teachers and the younger people involved in our community now understand that community vibe or are as invested in it? And two, do you still see things that were fundamental to IGS back then that are still the fundamentals that make the school what it is? So, a couple of questions there.
I think, I mean, our young people, we have so much to learn from them. And I'm, you know, when I'm working with them as part of my accreditation role, I learn a lot from them. And it's also wonderful to see them, they do get swept up, maybe in a different way, with that whole IGS feel. You see them on International Day. They come to school dressed in, you know, their national costume or the colours of where the family came from. So they bring their stories, and I think that's really important, as well as maintaining our story, I think it's really important that we get their stories, you know. And that's, I think, what makes IGS special. It's the community and that collegiality, you know, whether it's, you know, someone who's in their 20s or some of us who are a little bit older than that. I think generally we're all here for the same reason. And the second part of your question, things like, I think International Day, always for me, is that moment that being able to see kids trying all sorts of food and going into the country rooms and experiencing the culture or the dancing. I remember doing the Greek room for many years with Maxine, and later our boys joining us. So Greek really never left IGS. And if you ask any of my students, I'll tell you I'm still telling them stories about my culture.
Well, the Greek room, I can personally attest to eating about 25,000 souvlaki.
Yeah, yeah, it was pumping, I remember.
Oh, how good.
Zorba was going, and food and music.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Okay, so you say International Day. What about the broader principles? You still see, you know, I mean, I look and I to me, I still see some of those things that have been there.
Absolutely.
And even though, when you think of it, the school's probably grown by 10.
Oh,
maybe
yeah, definitely.
More.
Definitely.
And anything that grows by 10 has got to change.
Absolutely.
But one of the things I think is that if, you know, you tell me, I think there are still. But
yeah, definitely. I think the connection, I mean, our students, that connection that the staff have with students and the students with the staff, you know, I've been able to, having worked in a school this long, you can see the students going from preschool through to primary school, through to high school, then coming back and working in aftercare or clubs. Some of them coming back and being teachers or doing their prac at the school. I mean, I don't know of many places where, and I don't know why that has never changed. And if you hear, you know, the Year 12s when they speak at the end of their last year, one of the things they talk about year after year is that connection with the teachers. And I think that comes from what we've created at IGS. And, you know, I was recently at a wedding of one of the students. I'm now starting to teach the children of former students. My goodness, like, how incredible is that?
Well, I'm actually going to do a story very soon on parents who went through school and have now got their kids, and it's quite amazing. There's a lot more than you think.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So,
one of my Year 5 classes, I had Rita Finn's daughter and a Year 12 student at the time when I started in my first year, their son.
Oh, okay.
So it was this incredible full circle.
No, it is. It's a pretty, it's a nice thing to have done. You know, we're very lucky in that we've been there and seen, and our kids went through, and you know, it was a very lucky and good life experience. I always felt. Yeah.
I mean, coming also to school with your children, you would. You know, I remember sharing an office with you at one time, and the kids would come in and bags would be dumped, and but that was also a really special time to have.
It was.
And I guess I've seen what IGS produces. You would say the same, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We talk about world ready, and I think our kids are definitely world ready. They leave school and do, you know, not just our kids, but you look at the alumni and they're doing incredible things.
You know what? It's just so gratifying to do those interviews and even do the reunions and speak to them. It is just so good to know that what we were trying to produce, we actually are producing.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
That's why some things
Yeah.
like those interviews and this interview are good, because people can see that, that feeling and that passion for the school
Yeah.
still exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, obviously, it hasn't all been beer and Skittles over the years. Is any times where you thought things were, a little bit shaky from your point of view, or you thought that? I mean, obviously, there's always the stories about the early days, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Look, there are moments of, like in any workplace or any organisation, there are moments of, up and down. And I think when I think about why would I leave IGS, people will say to me, you've been there for 36 years, don't you want to try something different? But at the crust of it all, IGS is where I want to be. I genuinely get up in the morning and I'm happy to come. It doesn't even feel like work on some days. And I think working with students and seeing the students benefit from what we do at IGS, going to language camp and things like that. It's, why would I go anywhere else when I believe in this system and I believe in what we do here? So even though, I mean, it probably wouldn't be normal to say it's all been, smooth sailing, but nothing's ever been so major.
No.
And I think, if we go back to earlier on, I think there are a few of us here that would have no qualms in standing up and saying what we think.
Yeah.
So
no, that's very true. No, it is. It's been a great journey, and you've been a huge part of the journey. I mean, you've been basically there from the start. Okay, I can't have an interview with Michelle Weir without mentioning Sydney Blinds.
I didn't know how you were going to bring that into the interview. That was the Greek Michelle Weir. That was my fiery.
Wow.
That is the don't mess with me.
All I can say was I was scared, and I was only sitting in the office. I wasn't even on the end of
on the end of the line. Yeah, but see, in those days there were no risk assessments. So I remember taking my class down to Surrey Hills to the fruit shop, because we were learning about fruit and vegetables. And why not just get up and go down to the fruit shop there was no parental permission and the kids were great. One of my first experiences, I took my Year 5 class down to Canberra for a 3-night camp on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but teaching, the Greek, there was a lot of that real life stuff. So those sorts of experiences, I remember getting like the police coming in and talking to the students about the local, like people who help us in the community. So, going up to the park. I remember taking the kids up to the park and having a lesson up at the park because you could. And we'd take our lunch there. We had no mobile phones, but people would, know we were up at Ward Park having a session, or you'd see sometimes the kids had enough. So you'd go, come on, we'll go up and have a play. I think there weren't the restrictions, not just IGS, that society has put into today. So there was a lot more freedom to do those sorts of things. We can still do those things now, but there's a lot of paperwork involved.
It's very difficult. I used to go to Yumcha once a term with my Chinese history class, and then when we were doing the samurai, we'd go down to a Japanese restaurant and have a big feed, and it was that's just what happened.
Yeah. We did. This was actually with my home class because we had pajama day. So we decided to go for a walk down to Surrey Hills. We went down to the local cafe in our PJs. Somewhere there'll be photos of that. But it was, very casual and pretty stress-free, I would say. You weren't tied down with all the what we have these days. As I said, for me, one of the big things when I came for my interview was the just that whole difference of what my schooling was like and what IGS was like. And I wasn't here when they were really, you know, fighting for the school with Parliament and the Department of Education. But, you know, having those people in those powerful positions who were against that idea, it reminded me when I heard those stories, my parents were told not to speak Greek to me at home because it would hinder my English. And that's not what language learning is all about. I still think we need more IGS schools around. I think we're in an area where we're lucky to have that understanding and that acceptance and the celebration of other cultures and who we are as Australians. But I think even today we need a few more IGS schools around, definitely. But I remember Lucy coming to me. I had a Year 5 class at the time, and she said, so I'm doing my thesis for her Masters in Aboriginal Studies, and I was wanting to do this project where we connect a rural school with an urban school. So I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. So we were going to do the whole thing. We were going to go there. My class was going to somehow be involved to be going there, and then they were going to come here, but then COVID hit. And so we ended up doing just a few Zooms, which was really interesting. And then Lucy and her husband Hero were going to head over to Gaduga. So we incorporated what we did for science to create these packages that the kids had created, because that was part of our science unit. And then they packaged up things like stationery or footballs or whatever, and Lucy took them there with little notes from the kids. So the connection was made. The Year 5 group couldn't go, but the following year these students were in Year 6, and then Lucy organised for them to actually do the trip. So I didn't go on the first trip, but then I was lucky enough to be involved with the second, third, and now I think fourth trip. Right. So I did the second trip with Lucy, and I just remember, we were at the Bakara River fishing for boogalies, the yabbies, and I remember watching these kids who normally would be, you know, on their games, not even thinking about that. Initially, Auntie Mindy was teaching them how to, you know, find a stick, get this string and tie the chicken neck on the string, and then, you know, go down to the river. And the kids were like, ooh, initially, and they were going down to the water. Oh, these are my really good Nike shoes or whatever it was. And within half an hour, these kids were in up to their knees, fishing, picking up the yabbies, and we were there all day, and it was so beautiful to see these kids being a part of that. Yeah, nice. And then as the week went on, because that was at the beginning of the trip, as the week went on, watching the connections, the community's tiny. I mean, there are, I think, 26 or 28 students in the school. We double that population when we take our 30 students. But for the students to be able to sit and listen to the elders, telling them stories, teaching them language, teaching them songs in language, doing art. And I think one of the most powerful experiences was the very last night we had a smoking ceremony, and Auntie Mindy asked all the kids, when we're walking over to the fire, I want you to pick up something that represents your trip. So And then sitting around the fire with Auntie Mindy, she had done the smoking ceremony with all of us, and hearing what the kids, and some of the kids were getting quite emotional about the experience, and how their little object represented that trip, I think has got to be one of my top 3 highlights in my teaching career.
Wow.
And I remember walking back from that, and one of the students said, "Mrs. Weir, I'm feeling something inside me here, and it feels really good." And I thought, yep, you've got it. And it really is a life-changing experience, not just for the kids, but for me, that first year, I remember thinking, I'm ashamed of myself that it's taken me this long to do something like this. So, yeah, it's an amazing experience. I know parents have said, wow, I don't know what happened on that trip, but my child's a changed child, or...
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, and when they finish in Year 6, that's definitely one of the highlights. And the word spread, because we're just about to do the next trip, and some of the kids are writing a persuasive text about why they should be chosen to come to Gaduga.
Not everyone can go.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
because the community is too small, we have to respect that. I would love to take the whole of Year 6, but also, having said that, it's a pretty tough trip, and not all students are ready for it yet. You see some of them who missed out or weren't ready in Year 6 have gone on in Year 9 to do Red Earth. So it is a long trip for that age group, and it's a very isolated place. So there are no shops. Nearest medical facilities are an hour away.
But the other thing is, you can't swamp the community.
No, that's the priority. We just can't have, you know, we already feel like we overtake the community. But yeah, it's definitely a highlight in my teaching career.
Michelle, really great to have you.
Thank you, Paul. It's
always a pleasure, and yes, that was really good. I think everyone will enjoy hearing what you've got to say.